Welcome back to the Woodgrafter part 3 in the router table series. Today we're going to put the router table through its paces with a simple project. If that sounds good, stick around. And welcome back, we've made it, part 3 in the router table series. Now today I'm going to build a simple project. Now the project I'm building, I'm calling the pop head display cabinet. And here it is, I've also gone all digital, so I've got my iPad now, and on the iPad I've got my plans. This is it, it's a very simple framework here. It's going to be made out of MDF, I'm going for the painted option. And this is my son, he's got an ever expanding collection of pop heads. That's a pop head, if you don't know what a pop head is. And he collects a Fortnite figures. So I thought it'd be a really good idea, and he wanted one anyway, to give him a display case where he can put all the pop heads inside. That's what we're going to build. I've actually designed this to be cut out on a CNC machine, but I thought while I want to test a router table, make it by hand and see what it looks like. Now the reason that I've chose this project to test our router table is it's all about precision. In the centre of the design are these boards that come together in a cross, so imagine a full grid of these. And that's quite simply a matter of routing halfway down this one and halfway down this one and bringing that together. So if that bit is out at all in any way, shape or form, that's going to give us a gap. So it's very fine tolerances we're going to work to. Now the outside is a slightly wider frame and all these corners are going to be mounted. So we can just put this in theory into the 45-degree angle and that should give me perfectly mitered corners. And the matrix that we'll make will sit inside that mitered frame by a number of stopped dados inside the side panels. So a lot of joinery, all router driven. So it's going to be interesting to see how well this does. So job one, let's drop in the router bit. Now this is a router bit I'm using, it's a white side router bit and it's 9.5 millimeters. Now this stock is nominally 9 millimeters, if you measure it it's 9.3 millimeters. So that 0.2 millimeters will give me a nice fit inside here, not too loose, not too tight. Assuming that this has got zero wobble inside it and that router bit is 90 degrees to the table. Job one, let's drop it in. No harder. Take out the plate. Taking our ever so cute handle and raise that up. So the first thing I would say is that's a beautiful smooth motion. You've got to feel that to experience it. And there's no play, very little play. Outside there's less than ½ millimeter of play before that starts to move. That's very good, very impressive. I can drop it in. I've got the ½ inch chuck inside it. Two spanner technique, nothing new and unique there, but that works well. So that's it, no harder than banging that in. Now I can just wind that down out of the way a little bit and choose the appropriate plate. These are the 3 plates that come with it. You can buy a whole range of these plates. That one looks like it could be the right size. That's good enough. Router bit in. I mean, that was relatively simple and painless. So, in terms of setup, happy days, super job. I'm going to drop the fence on now. Bolt number 1. Bolt number 2. Get that more or less centre. Now remember I mentioned in a previous video that these fences protrude out from this edge. So anything that you clamp on here naturally tips. I really didn't like that. I just 3D printed these little spacers out and that simply slots into the groove at the top and the front face of that is now level with the front face of this. So when I tighten these on, they're not tipping anymore, everything's nice and smooth. Now Sauter Shop actually saw that video where I was saying, look, the fence to me, a little bit middle of the road, not overly impressed, don't like the fact that's smooth. And they were straight onto it. And I got an email this morning from Andy over at Sauter Shop saying, hey, the engineers saw that, Andy, and what they've now done, they've actually created a little spacer that does something similar, not seen it yet, that does something similar, that actually puts this flush with the front face. So I was really impressed with that. They didn't duck the criticism. They said, yep, that's a valid criticism. Let's do something about it. So they took the feedback, Within days, they'd created something, productionized something, and now they've been made available as part of the kit. So there's a couple of those coming to me in the post. If I get them before we go live with this video, I'll just put a little bit of an ad in now. And what they've done, really super simple, is I've just created these little black washers, these little black plastic washers. And they're made with a lot of precision inside it, so they're all exactly the same size, and I've tested them. They sent me quite a few of these through. And all you do, can you see that here on the back? You just put them on the nut that you want to put in, and that just steps this forward. Now what's even better, it steps it forward so it's a hair's breadth sticking outside of that fence. So this now is not held tight against the fence, it's held tight against the metal rail, which means even with these a lot of hardware in place, I can easily slide and adjust these fences. So it's turned, just that little plastic washer has turned a so-so fence into a precision fence that gives me a lot of adjustability. So actually, I'm loving this fence as well. And that's their solution. Okay, cool. So we've got our solution, they've got their solution. That takes the criticism I had away from this fence. The only other modification I made, I just found a suitable adapter and I banged it into that hole there. And then that just allows me to put the Festool hose into that to give me some dust collection. So that's it, super simple, no great issues and problems there, I don't think. So I've got my two scrap pieces of wood and I've just made sure that I've got two square edges. I'm going to bring the fence in and zero it down to the outside cutter edge here, and then I'm going to take the fence back by half the distance of my stock, which would be about 50mm. I'm going to then square the fence up at that 50mm mark, so the fence is square to my mitre gauge, and then using the square edge I can just simply slide into that to make the cut. Job one, let me get this zeroed in. Now that's interesting, so you can see these marks we spoke about here. The end of this one is actually the centre of this bit. So if you wanted to centre that bit, you can just come in and line your fence up on those two centres, and that's pretty much the centre of the bit. However, I want to come further forward than that, and now there's no marks here on this side. Not a big thing, but just so you're aware. So just coming in with my mitre gauge, and I'm just checking that that fence is more or less square. It's not critical at this point, and is zeroed. Okay, that looks good to me, and now I can lock that down. So I now know my fence is at 90 degrees to my mitre square, which is not critical at this point, but is useful. And now I'm just going to come in and zero my gauge. And now I want to just take this back by 50mm or so. Okay, 50.2 is near enough. Let's check I'm relatively square to my fence, and I am, and I'm going to lock that down. Now, I've now got a 50mm cut into that fence. I'm going to bring in my mitre gauge, and then I'm just going to lock that mitre gauge into place with a simple clamp. Now, what I've also discovered on this fence, it's got a flat back, and that might be a so what. So what? It allows you to clamp things flush to the front, which is great. Doesn't sound like much, that's actually a really useful feature. Not something I had on my other fence. Okay, so I've now got a good reference surface. I can come directly in. Now take my stock, my two right angle corners together against that fence, and I now can come in and make that cut, and it should all work out. Let's give it a go and see. Speed control, somebody asked me about the speed control, how easy is it to get to the speed control. I'm going to turn this to its maximum speed. Done that, so that's how easy it is to access the controls. It's in its 90-degree position, it's all looking good, everything's set up. Just checking myself to make sure I'm in good shape here. I am. I don't need the bit to be that high, so I'm actually now just going to lower the bit down. So fine adjustment. I'm loving this adjustment, just so it's about there, and that's just obviously for safety's sake. Lock that into place. I'm going to drop the fence down so it's just above the router, that little guard. And now I'm safe and secure away from that moving, spinning router bit. Okay, cool. I'll make the first cut on this one, then I'll come back in and I'll make the second cut on this one. Everything's connected up to my dust extractor, so when I start this, the dust extractor will start. And there you go, you can see that comes together reasonably well when that's glued. That'll be nice and tight, but you can see I'm too high there. So I now just want to move this back by whatever that is. So about 5mm. Isolate it from the mains. Just using these marks on the router bed to keep everything level. Let's show how that worked. That's a little bit too far. Look at that, wow. Lock it down quick, 5. Good. Just want to check I'm square, and I am. So those marks there really are precision. I use those marks here on the reference gauge to line up that fence, and it's come out once again bang on square. So really impressed with that. Okay. I'll just come in to take a different cut. Okay. Look at that, look at that, absolutely glorious. That's a beautiful fit, just what I was after. That's nice and flush at the front there. So that distance on that fence is now set, not going to move that again. Well, what can you say? So everything's come out beautifully flush on the top, so it's given me the same cut all over the place, which is awesome, and it's all come out reasonably square. Now the way the inner frame connects to the outside frame is via the stop dado, and you can just see here at the end that little cutout, that 5mm cutout, that from memory, yep, is 18mm deep. So I need to set the router table up to give me that beautiful little cutout there at the end. Let's do that. So what I'll do, I'll raise this router bit up by 18mm, but let's check how good this is. We know that a full revolution of this is 4mm, so each quarter is 1mm. So in theory, if I put this flush to the plate and then wind this round 4, 8, 12, 16, 18, that should actually be bang on 18. So let's see how good this actually is. Just going to zero it down first of all. So there, that's about 0. We'll just bring this in now and just 0 this off. And let's try. Find a convenient point. There you go, 1/4 to. 4, 8, 12, 16, 17, 18, and that's raised it up by, whoa, you won't believe that, 17.72. That's not too shabby, is it? That's pretty cool. So I'm just going to fine tune this now to 18. I can literally adjust this by 0.01 millimeter at a time. And 18 is, oops, there. Lock it down. Good. So now I want this to be 5 millimeters deep. So let's zero the front of the fence. Zero our gauge. And let's just move this back by 5 millimeters. 5.06. I'm not going to argue over 0.06 of a millimeter. Yep. Good. Just slide in our split fence. Nice and easy to use. Perfect. And let's just see if that's square. Yeah, and once again, I've used the marks on this cage, and once again, we've come in beautifully square with our mitre fence. Okay, let's do this then. Looks pretty good, doesn't it? Step down is 5.2, which is pretty much what we set that fence to, isn't it? So that's quite cool. And this step down here is 18.01. So I'm not going to argue about the accuracy of that. Obviously, we set that up, we took our time to set it up, but with results like that, you can't complain, can you? Okay, I'm just checking the alignments of these fences. You can see now I've got that cut out. That's going back into reasonably well. So that's quite good. So that shows these two fences are in line with each other. And now in theory, we can just go ahead and make all these cuts. So that's all looking good. Everything's lining up nicely. The next thing I want to do is to put the joinery in the side pieces. Obviously it's a stop dado 5 millimeters deep. So obviously I want to make a stop dado in this, and that dado's got to be that length there, so I can use this to line up my router bit. Power's off. So I'm just roughly trying to get the end of that cut on the center point of the router, and at the same time just using the incremental marks on the lift to make sure it's all square. I'm getting to trust those marks quite a lot now. It's actually really quite good, isn't it? How quickly that just sort of happened. Now the height of that has got to be that thickness there. So in theory I can just use this as a bit of a height gauge now. There. And once again, incredible control on the adjustments here. Really good. Lock that down. So before I go much further, I just want to check this is all looking good. So I'm going to come in with a little piece of scrap here, bring in my guide fence. I can't argue with that. That looks like a good depth to me, and it's a good length as well, so I'm pretty confident in that setup, which is nice. Okay, so now I just want to make sure that these boards fit well enough. That's okay. Check this side. Oh, bad. Like it was made for it, isn't it, really? Now this one won't fit on, obviously, because I need to mitre the corners, but I can get an idea. Yep. So, everything's looking really good. It's all lining up, which is amazing. So you can see what I mean by it's not a complicated build, but the precision you need in the joinery is extreme. Anything that's out, even by a fraction of a millimetre, it doesn't fit. Everything's got to line up, and that's why I thought it'd be a really good test for this. Now the final thing is I want to mitre the corners. I've never ever done this on a router table, because I've never had a router table that pivots. Now if you think about the way you'd normally miter a corner on a relatively deep unit, you go to the table saw, you put it at 45 degrees and you give it a crack. Now that very often gives you a corner that's not beautifully clean. So in theory, a router blade spinning at high speed at 45 degrees is a good idea. Let's give it a go. Now I don't have a proven technique for doing this because I've never done it before, but I've got an idea. So job one, I'm going to take the plate out and I'm going to move the router back so I've got place to tip it, which would make sense. There's a handy little groove here to put the screwdriver in that just allows you to pop that plate out, nice and simply. Under the table, 2 red levers, 1, 2, easy to get. And now I can slide that towards me. Lock the 2 red levers down again, release the 2 black levers and tip that to 45 degrees. Now that's felt like a stay there. So I've got it on the stop that says that should be 45 degrees. Got to come in with my trend level box. Let's take a 0 position from the table. 0 that down. Okay. Rest this on there. It's not got a hold function on it, I'm afraid. And that's coming in at 45.1. So according to this, it's 45.1 degrees, and I think that's probably near enough. I mean, the proof is going to be when I've got a joint in place, of course. So now I can drop back in the plate, so now you can see why it's got that long groove inside there. I'm going to bring the fence in to about there. I'm not too concerned about the height. I've got the angle right, and what I'm thinking of is exposing a 45-degree slope of cutting router bit to that fence, and in theory when I bring this across it will cut it to 45 degree, providing I've got the height correct. So make sure I've got this fence nice and square, and once again it is. Those marks, fantastic on that, really good, loving that. So to get the height, here's my theory. I'm going to raise the router bit up, and I've just orientated the cutter so the cutting point is sticking up, so the highest part of the cut is uppermost. Just take one of those grooves we made earlier on and just putting that either side of that router bit and winding the router bit out of the way. Not moving that test stock. I'm going to take a flat ruler and I'm going to push that right up against the fence, and I'm going to slowly raise this up until that ruler just starts to lift and just pushes away from the fence, and that's about there. And in theory that distance from the top of the cutter to the base is now the thickness of my stock. In theory we're going to come through and we'll make a test cut, and we should be able to see whether that's true or not. And now we can bring in a 45-degree quality square and we can test it. What do you think? I'll tell you, that is pretty impressive, I think. Pretty impressive. So I didn't calibrate this, that's straight from the factory, and it was on the preset for 45 degrees. It was dead easy to find the height once I'd worked out a technique, and it's given me a great result. Just going to cut this piece as well. Now in theory, we have a rather beautiful mitered corner. And does it get any simpler and easier than that? And we should now be in a situation where, and look at that, look at that, come on. Gorgeous. And if all our work's been good, this needs pulling in a little bit, obviously, to clamp in the middle where it's just bowing out under those corner clamps. But in theory, this should all be square. So all that remains is to get that glued up get it sealed, get it painted, get it on my son's wall and put his pop heads inside. So there you go, a couple of coats of chalk paint later and a sealing of wax, and I've installed the brackets on the back of it so I can hang it on my son's wall and we're good to go. One of the reasons I painted this white, apart from my son wanting it white of course, is it will show up the errors in our joinery. There's no filler on this. This is exactly as you saw off the tools, and I've not filled it, I've just sprayed it with chalk paint, and it's brilliant. It's bang on. The joints are really tight. It's super solid. There's no wobble inside that, and it's come out incredibly well. The 45-degree miters, as you saw, were bang on, and now they're glued. That's absolutely fantastic, super strong. No screws in this, no tacks in this. It's all the joinery that holds it together and the design that gives it the stability. So from a project point of view, it's worked really well. Now, a few of you have asked me, do I believe it's got enough grunt to do the raised panel doors I was talking about? And yes, I do. We saw in video 2 a very simple cut with a large bit. Now don't forget, the motor I've got inside here is an 1800 watt motor. That's 2.4 horsepower, and it generates a lot of torque, So I've no doubt at all it's going to do the raised panel doors for me. No doubt at all about that. So from a spindle point of view, from a router motor point of view, it's got the speed I need, it's completely accurate, there's no wobble at all inside that chuck, and it will do both ranges of the stuff I want to need. So it's a thumbs up for me for the series of routers inside that table. The table itself is one of the best tables I've ever seen. The metal insert plate is beautifully level with the rest of the surface. There's nothing to catch on. And again, a few of you asked me about that. And we've got those little metal shims that we looked at last time that just allows you to adjust that. And it works. And with them being metal, they sit quite happily on the rare earth magnets and they don't move. And it gives me a beautiful level surface right across. Fantastic. The precision and the control of the lift is phenomenal. I really am doing 10th of millimeter adjustments on this thing, really tuning it in and dialing in the cuts that I want. So the lift is fantastic. Now I was curious about the pivoting of this. Would it add value? Do I really care? Now the minute I snapped that router into the 45-degree position using the preset stops on the table itself, and then we took the cut and it was bang on square. It came out, this was a piece, and it came out bang on 90 degrees. You had me at hello. And I've no doubt at all that as I start to use different angles on that, then that's really going to come out well. And what I love about that, it's repeatable. It bangs back into that slot every single time, repeatable cuts. When I put it back to the upright position, it was back on, bang on 90 degrees, ready to go. That sort of repeatability and usability, you can't really fault inside the workshop. I was already thinking through, I could use this for splines, I could put that at 45 degrees, I can take a piece of wood in there, I can cut splines out. It opens up a whole new style of woodworking that I've not really considered yet. And I'm pretty confident I'll find more and more things to do with that angle attachment as time goes on. I'm also beginning to think, can I now start to do complex angle cuts on things like box joints if I want to make cradle type joinery, you know, a baby's cradle where it slopes down, you've got those joints on the end. That could be interesting to look at. So again, on this router table, it's a big thumbs up from me. So I love the router and I love the router table. The fence, as you know, I was a bit so-so about the fence, and the big issue I had with the fence is that the front of the fence is set forward from the rail at the back. Just that little plastic washer has turned a so-so fence into a precision fence that gives me a lot of adjustability. So actually, I'm loving this fence as well. The dust extraction on this is okay. There wasn't a lot falling through onto the ground, and you saw it being taken away as we did the activity. The precision markings on this with that fence allows me to line things up pretty quickly. The way I've built it with the various slides gives me a lot of functionality on side here. And I've not tested this yet, but that's so firm that I've no doubt at all that freehand routing pin is also going to be successful. And don't forget, I love the cute little handle that allows me to raise and lower it. So, is it good enough for me to invest that amount of money to keep this inside my workshop? And the simple answer to that question is yes. And in fact, it's a no-brainer. And even as I was reviewing it and putting it in place and playing with it, loads of you got in touch and said, there's no way you're going to send that back, Andy. No way at all. It's a quality product, it's a precision product. I think it's going to outlive me. It was great that it was so easy to install in the bench, and the accuracy and the precision and the adjustability, I've never seen anything like it. It makes the CMS system I was using from Festool look like a toy. It looks like an amateur job. This is really, really good. So I can't recommend this enough. I really love it. So Andy from Sauter Shop, thank you for getting in touch. Thank you for introducing me into the kit. Send me the invoice through and I will send you the money through by return. Don't forget, if you do purchase something, put on the comments the Woodgrafter sent me or recommended, and they will send you some free gift. Either, I've not got it in the workshop, either the cup or the ruler, depending what mood they're in. Thank you for watching, and as always, I'll see you soon. Take care.